Now we move on, and up next we have Rael Levitt, CEO at Inospace, to take us through a presentation on the last mile, logistics, e-commerce, and tech. Please help me welcome Rael.
Some people outside are coming in. When they asked me to speak, they said I must have my presentation ready. It's going to be 15 minutes. I said it's going to be 2 slides. Welcome and thank you. So the question of last mile logistics, there we go, hold on, let's go, can I go back? It was quite interesting actually, the sort of word last mile logistics, I hadn't actually heard of it, and about just before COVID I'd heard that Blackstone, the world's largest private equity fund, was putting billions of rands into this sector called last mile logistics. And I came across a company, which was based in the UK. They were purchasing assets all across Europe called Mileway. And they were in the sector called last mile logistics, and they were getting billions of rands worth of funding to grow this business. And it surprised me. So I went to go look at their website. It wasn't particularly impressive. And when I looked at their assets, because I was trying to understand what does this actually, this word last mile logistics, what does it actually mean? I saw a couple of photos of their buildings, and I said, well, that's interesting. They look just the same as our couple of little industrial units in Epping Industria in Cape Town, and in Wynberg Industria in Johannesburg, and in Midrand. But the truth is that it is a sector which is growing. Many people say, what is last mile logistics? And I've got a whole presentation there of logistics, but if you don't have to read it all, you can really just, I'll talk through it. And in South Africa, when the media talks about logistics or CEOs talk about logistics, what they really have been speaking about is big box logistics. That has really been the conversation. There are companies in South Africa like Equitas, which specialize in it, others like Fortress, which are growing into it. The world's largest logistics owner and operator is called Prologis, who based in the United States and across the world now. And they are talking about these big, large warehouses which we see coming up all over South Africa, largely around airports. That is logistics. But the fact is that there is a whole industry of different logistics sectors. And last mile logistics is really smaller logistics. It is a subsector of industrial. And when I say it's a subsector of industrial, it is not necessarily a subsector of industrial. It could also be a subsector of retail. In South Africa at the moment, it is a subsector of the industrial market, and so when you find last mile logistics properties, they would be in industrial areas, largely because industrial property is actually cheaper to build and it has been cheaper to rent. And in a place like South Africa, a large number of our industrial areas are right on the urban edge. I mean, we don't need to look very far. If you take Wynberg, it's just on the other side of the highway. In Midrand, you've got people living very near industrial areas. In South Africa, Cape Town and Durban, industrial areas are close to the city edge. The UK would be similar. And what last mile really means, it means the warehousing and delivery of goods straight to other consumers, be it B2B or B2C, it is going through to those consumers. They are smaller spaces. I see my friend Ronald is from Agility. They are large. They deal with large format logistics, big box logistics, Agility throughout Africa. These are much smaller spaces. Your last mile logistics would be sub 1,000 square meters. Logistics operators do need place for, quite simply need for vehicles to arrive, for vehicles to come in and out. A lot of the logistics operators today and here in South Africa have got scooters, so you need space for scooters. They are open 24 hours. They don't necessarily need great height. Everybody says, oh, you know, logistics, you need this enormous height. In fact, we were taking the Agility people around the other day, and they said it's quite interesting. All your buildings are quite low in terms of the height, the new builds. And the truth is that your smaller players can't actually afford to go very high racking. So racking tends to be lower. Also, just the speed of moving goods in and out to get to the end consumer. So that's really the sort of last mile logistics business. And the question that everybody asks is, well, like, why has it suddenly come to the fore now? And why are people all of a sudden talking about this sort of sector last mile logistics? And I have my friend Denise here from Business Day. Probably a year ago, she had never written about last mile logistics, and now it has become quite a common theme, which we see in the media and newspapers today, writing about this new sector. And the truth is, it's just e-commerce. And what happened was that COVID just sped everything up. And it sped e-commerce up because, quite simply, if you wanted to buy goods, you now could have it ordered and directly at home. South Africa had its quirk. They stopped e-commerce deliveries for a little bit until they came to their senses. But it is all about e-commerce. It is all about the speed of getting goods to customers. Now, one of the most common last mile logistics spaces would be dark kitchens. Now, what's a dark kitchen? When you go on your Uber app, or you go or you go on Bolt and you want to get food, the food can come from a retail store, but it also can come from a small logistics space on the outskirts of the city. And here, just across the road in Wynberg, we've got a whole range of dark kitchens, because when you're ordering that food, even if you're ordering food from a recognizable brand, you're not quite sure where it's being made. It could be made in Melrose Arch. It also could be made across the road in Wynberg, where rental rates are at 60, 70 rand a square meter versus 300-400 rand a square meter. So dark kitchens, dark stores, there's a big growth of dark stores, where, again, when you go on your ShopRite 6060 app, ShopRite Checkers, and you're ordering food, it may well come from the store at Sandton City, but it could also come from a warehouse. But e-commerce has really been the great changer. And in many ways, what it has done, it has sidelined the retail physical store, and it is moved into a last mile logistics space. And again, last mile logistics is largely designed from business to the consumer. The big box spaces that you see along all our highways and around the world, the Prolodges and the Amazons and the Takealots and the big spaces, they are really designed for B2B. They are not designed for fulfillment to the consumer's home. They are designed, when we see Truworths and Woolworths and these big box logistics, they really are moving goods through their big box logistics to their stores. They're not coming to you in your home. That's what last mile logistics has done. But in many ways, it has sidelined the retailers. And many of our tenants, we Inospace, we have 50 parks across South Africa. We are a relatively new business, and we've grown quite aggressively. We have about 1,500 tenants. Many of our businesses do not have a retail store presence at all. And one of the favorite examples that I talk about is a company called Veldskun. Many South Africans know them. Now, 10 years ago, Veldskun would have had a retail store in every shopping centre in South Africa. They have one in Melrose Arch, one in Sandton, one down in Century City in Cape Town, one in Umhlanga Ridge, but they have no retail footprint. It is purely an e-commerce store. They have a small showroom in one of our warehouses, and they are distributing directly to the consumer. That is what last mile logistics is doing. And in many ways, it is far cheaper for those businesses to get directly to the consumer without having the marketing footprint of a retail shopping center. And of course, the retail shopping center owners will get upset when I say this, but in many ways, a retail shopping center is purely a marketing platform. It's a very nice marketing platform. It's got tiles, and it's got Christmas trees at Christmas, and it plays nice music, and it's a fun place in South Africa. It is a nice place to go because it is safe to be in that environment. But if you want food, you can get food delivered directly from a last mile logistics unit straight into your home. And that is really explaining why it has come to the fore. And from the perspective of retail investors, and in South Africa, and I truly would say that we're probably one of the only companies who focused in on this area as a specialized focus. So, and what has been happening globally, and I'll show you some of the numbers and the details, but it has extremely low vacancy. And in our portfolio of last mile logistics spaces, our occupancy, we don't like to call it vacancy. Some real estate people talk about vacancy. Why start with a negative word? We'd rather call it occupancy. Our occupancies are in the sort of late 90%. There's also limited supply on the horizon, largely because building costs are high. In our business, we invariably buy existing older industrial properties at sort of 5,000 rand a square meter. Their replacement value is 10 to 12,000 rand a square meter, so there's not a lot of new supply coming on the market. And there's been strong rental growth. We've seen double-digit figures over the last 6 months, despite electricity crisis and increasing interest rates. And strong demand from tenants as well as institutional investors are interested in it, and there's a promising outlook. Now, again, we are not unique. Big box logistics would be saying a very similar thing. Our view is that there's certainly a restricted supply. There is a growing demand for all the issues which I've raised. Even, for example, and again, you look across in South Africa in real estate. Take the last 10 years, we've seen lots of big retail shopping centers come out of the ground. We've seen beautiful office blocks rising up above the city in Sandton City, in Century City in Cape Town. We've seen hotels. There hasn't been a lot of small development of small units, small format logistics properties in years and years. And as Sam Zell says, if you ever follow Sam, he says, look, life goes down. It's quite simple. The old-fashioned law of supply and demand always gets back into property. So certainly there is growing demand with restricted supply. Now I have some interesting graphs over here. In terms of what, I do love when we go into the European markets, there is a lot of information. But certainly, if you look at in 2022, the take-up has been up to 10 million square meters. And you can see in these countries the growth of last-mile logistics. It really has been a huge sector. And the pandemic has really caused a shortening or the reshoring of supply chains. So you're just seeing these buildings go fuller and fuller. This week I was walking around with many of our tenants and the same issue arises. Wherever I go, so what's your biggest issue? Our biggest issue is that we need more space, which if you are selling space as a living, that is a great place to be. So certainly we are seeing a growth in that market. That it has the lowest vacancy across the Eurozone. And you can really see in places like Dublin, their vacancy in the space of, 1%. Nothing goes over 3%. Poland's got the greatest vacancy there at 3%. And that is the exact same experience which you're seeing here in South Africa. So I only had 15 minutes to speak. If anyone knows me, I used to speak for a living, and I did like to speak quickly. So I have hit your time. I just wanted to show you an example. People often say, what does it look like? This is something which we have already launched in Cape Town. We launched it really 2 months ago, and we're almost 80% let. So you can have a look at a business in Pardon Island. Of course, it is a little bit of an advert. Thank you very much.